people who've been following me. One of the art people. They're aliens.
Open your mind real wide now.
I'm freaking out, man. You are freaking out, man.
Dragged into the light, truthers, reptilians, super soldiers, and death inside an online cult. Tony Russo, the author of that book that just dropped a month ago. So congrats on that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's a fascinating read. And am I to you're an investigative reporter as well? Is that
I'm a regular reporter. Sometimes I have to investigate.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So are you a broadcast journalist or?
Just a regular journalist. Print, actually. I was print and then digital for a while. I got into long form maybe 3 years ago. I started doing, I was hired to do a podcast called This Is War. And I was interviewing combat veterans about their experiences in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I did that for about 2 years. And then I started to work on this book. For that, I was, pretty much, I wrote about beer. I wrote about, businesses. I covered council meetings and town meetings and sewage and zoning and if it could be written about, I would write about it.
I have a broadcast degree in journalism myself, so I've worked in the newsroom and TV stations and radio stations, and we're all the same.
Yeah, if it's a small enough, I live in a small market, so you write about whatever,
right?
Whatever happens.
Well, sure, okay. So you did the podcast, you talk about the Iraq war veterans for a little bit. And now you're talking about an online cult, basically to a certain degree taking a couple lives away.
Yeah.
How did you stumble upon that?
It was going to be kind of my next assignment for the podcast. Is the shortest version is that I was working on a podcast, and the company that ended up buying the podcast didn't want my story the way it was. And so they were very kind, and they said, if you want to write a book about the story that you want to write about, then that's cool, but that's not the story that we're hoping to tell, I think is the fairest way to put it. It was super cool because they could have just told me to go pound sand down a rat hole,
right?
But they're like, yeah, no, go ahead, make the book, but we don't want the story. They told a different story. It came out, and it was a really good podcast, and it wasn't radically different. It's just I am really, always have been really more interested in the cultural implications of religion than in the, I'm not a true crime guy is the thing. One of the, I was talking to a friend of mine who is an editor, and I was telling her that the only legitimate criticisms I've gotten so far about the book, all of the reviews, I've gotten 1 or 2 negative reviews, but they've all been positive. And the complaint from the positive reviewers was that I didn't hit all of the true crime notes. And I guess that makes sense because I'm not a true crime writer. I'm not in the genre in a way. One of the things that I don't talk about, for example, is mental health. And a lot of people do want to talk about mental health as part of Sherry Schreiner's story. I pointedly avoided that because these are Christians who believe a lot of what lots of other Christians believe. And to say if we want to talk about whether it's crazy to be a Christian person, that's a harder conversation.
Right, you're walking a fine line with that where you're going.
Yeah,
right.
And of course, many of the people in the book aren't around anymore, so I also kind of shy away from this idea of diagnosing people from afar.
Yeah, I could see that. I mean, we talk about the religion aspect of this story. So, I mean, we'll get into the whole little deeper into the story and the, I guess, how society kind of, enabled this story to happen. Certain bubbles of our society. I like to call them bubbles of our society.
That's a word that people appreciate more now, so that's a good word choice.
Because because I just think you just live in your own world, which is fine and everything like that, but it's not the only world out there, and there's more to it to that, and the experience of living life elsewhere outside of where you grew up is also an important aspect. But that's another realm, going down another rabbit hole. But Dragged into the Light is really about, in essence, a woman using an invention by a scientist back in the 30s who came up with this creation called orgone, and it was an energy box. I guess he created a box that you would sit in, and it would kind of energize yourself and eliminate all the negativity out of your body or something like that.
That's as good a way to put it as any. Absolutely.
Okay. So he creates this, and he's trying to get some legitimacy. And let me get his name up too. Wilhelm Reich is his name, and he's the one that created this. It's kind of a sound bath in a sense, and he tries to parade this invention around to the government and even to Einstein as well. But nothing happens with this. And
it's made up. That's probably why.
Right.
And so the thing about Reich is he's working. I mean, he worked with Freud. This was a real psychologist. He was psychiatrist. He did the first serious work on the idea that sexual repression could have psychological consequences. Like that whole idea that's his idea, and we accept that because it's true, like if you're sexually repressed, it's going to manifest in other ways in your life. So he, having gone that far, he said, well, how can I cure it? And he thought that when a person had an orgasm, they were kind of participating in a ethereal experience. And now, for just a tiny bit of historical context, this is the atomic age, right? X-rays and splitting the atom and ultraviolet rays. And there are all these things that were previously speculated about that we could now measure and control. And he thinks that orgone is one of them. He thinks that orgone is like ultraviolet radiation. It's out there, but it's positive. It doesn't hurt. It only helps. And that's why he goes to Einstein, because he can measure stuff like that. And one of Einstein's assistants immediately sees what the problem is, and he says, no, there's nothing special about this box. And of course, that's where Reich kind of goes off the rails, because he's a scientist. He's a soft scientist, but he says, well, you guys must not have the tools to measure it yet. Rather than saying it doesn't exist, right, we're saying that the tools to measure it don't exist.
Right. Prove to me why it doesn't exist.
Exactly. And that is, and that's how he starts this this kind of revolution with orgone. And people, I mean, you can buy it today, and not just Sherry Shriner's. What was interesting about Sherry Shriner, the cult leader, was that she made it a Christian thing. But when you think of New Age crystals, you're thinking kind of about orgone. If you go to look at it online, a lot of the orgone you can buy online that's not Sherry Shriner's is a pyramid. It looks like a little glass pyramid with kind of cool designs in it. It's pleasant to look at. Sherry's are ugly, but the normal ones they're pleasant to look at.
They look a little bit kind of like homemade bars of soap.
They really did. Sherry's are not.
Right.
They're not good to look at, and they don't work. But so Reich actually started saying it could cure cancer, and that's when the FDA had to step in, and and eventually they jailed him because he wouldn't stop selling this to cancer patients.
Right.
And the story that I like to tell about why he thought the orgone box worked has to do with my experience with acupuncture, which I'm not against holistic medicine at all. I know that holistic medicine works. But I was suffering from terrible anxiety, which I'd never had a trouble with before, and I was in my 40s. And so my wife convinced me to go to this acupuncturist, and I went for 3 trips, and he absolutely cured me. So I'm not going to say he didn't cure my anxiety, because he did. But my experience was I'd go in there, and he'd put a warm light on my stomach, and he'd put on classical music, and the whole room would be dark, and he'd put pins in my ears, and then he'd leave me there for half an hour. And I would feel fantastic afterwards. But it occurred to me that, if you sit in a dark room with a warm light on your stomach in classical music for a half hour,
Right.
you are going to feel better. It's like forced meditation.
You don't need to pay $150 for that.
Exactly. And I'm a huge fan. Like, meditation is a real thing. It helps you get your head straight.
Yes.
And so I'm not casting any aspersions on meditation. I just realized that I could put a heating pad on my stomach, put on classical music, and close my eyes and feel better after 20 minutes.
That's the reporter in you, I believe.
It must be. And this is what I think was going on with orgone. One of the things, William S. Burroughs used to use it when he was dope sick. He had one in his house. And when he got dope sick, he would go down and he would get in his orgone box until he was feeling better. And again, of course he would feel better.
Well, I mean, a lot of it is also that you mentally, BS'd yourself into it being available to, heal yourself, and you believe in it. It's in a placebo. I mean,
yes, and it can work, and if it does work, that's fine, and if it does bring you inner peace, that's fine. It's not going to cure your cancer,
right?
And that's where
snake oil.
That's where the holistic healer that I went to, who did the acupuncture, he was very open about that. He said, "I am not a doctor.
Right.
I can make you feel better in some ways, and some things I'm going to say you better see. I'm not going to fix your broken arm.
Right.
I'm not going to cure your cancer.
Right.
Right. I'm going to give you a better sense of well-being using these tricks that people have been using for millennia to feel better, but Well, if it's literally a broken arm, I'm not going to pray over it. I'm going to send you to the hospital.
Right. So this orgone gets created with really the best of intentions.
Yes,
it's not nefarious. It's for positive use. It's to help. It's to help you out. The doctor doesn't get anywhere with that. Wilhelm Reich is his name, who created this. And so kind of it goes in the back ways, in the back alley. It's it's not even unheard of in a sense, right? It's kept alive for some reason though through the
New Age movement picked up.
Okay, they picked it up.
Huge, the Pacific Northwest.
When in the 70s?
I think I'm sure it was in the 70s.
Okay.
I'm sure there is. To this day, you can look them up. There is an Orgone Institute in Princeton, New Jersey.
Oh, wow.
So
maybe there is something to it.
It's been there the whole time. But it gets picked up by the New Agers and the whole crystal movement. And that's when Sherry Shriner comes. Sherry Shriner doesn't come across it until the 2007, I think.
Right.
But it had been there the whole time. But Sherry Shriner makes it Christian, which changes everything.
Right, and right before we get to that, this reminds me of the Integratron. Have you heard of the Integratron out Yucca?
No, what is that?
Yucca Valley. It's actually like it's a built construction sound bath, and it's supposed to be a time machine as well. So there's a big story behind that. You should look into it. The Integratron.
I'm writing it down now.
Yeah, Integratron, and it goes way back, man. It's out in Yucca Valley, outside Palm Springs. We're talking with Tony Russo, and he wrote the book "Dragged into the Light: Truthers, Reptilians, Super Soldiers, and Death Inside an Online Cult." And that's kind of where we're getting to right now, is the beginning of this online cult. Not a cult per se, as people living in the same place. It's not a commune. It's an online gathering. It's your online social media where everyone gets together in their own private chat groups and their own private lines and conduct the which is more truther than anything else.
Right. Yes.
What's more truther than this? No. It's just it's a crazy dive into the psyche of Americans who want to believe in something so bad that they'll believe in anything, really. And in my perspective, after reading the book, it kind of reminds me a little bit of after 9/11. A lot of conspiracies came out of 9/11, but a lot of answers weren't given. A lot of questions are still out there. A lot of people still think, the buildings were imploded on purpose inside, and there's a lot of proof to that. Even the announcer, Peter Jennings, said it on the news. It looks like it's like a demolition building pulled is what it looks like. So we've given different answers to that. So the truth was distorted that day. That's when the truth was distorted, I believe, for a lot of people who were unable to handle that situation. And I believe that's kind of maybe because the majority of the people who are in these cults who believe conspiracy theories are 50 to 70 years old, aren't they? There's the majority of them, aren't they?
Many, yes. They're almost all truthers. Trutherism is, I think, the only conspiracy that has an actual date. Like, we don't know how long people have been worried about lizard overlords, and we don't know how long people have been, like, there's evidence that somebody else may have discovered orgone in the 1840s or something, but we know that September 12th, 2001 was the birth of the truther movement. And that is a heavy influence. And I'm from up that way. You could see that I grew up in Jersey, but I grew up across the river from the bay, from the Twin Towers. And Stephen Mineo, who is one who he dies on page 1, so it's not a spoiler. But Stephen Mineo, who died as a result of his affiliation with this cult, he grew up again within sight of the Twin Towers, and he was probably about 17 at the time, and it broke a lot of people. It just shattered the faith. And I think that you're very close to the point where it doesn't matter whether, well, I'm sorry, I'm sure it matters to lots of people whether or not it was a conspiracy, but the fact that we didn't get the kind of leadership that we had hoped we would get in a crisis is, nobody came out and said, we know what's going on, this is what's going on. Everybody came out and said, we don't know what's going on. And when your country has been attacked and the government says we have no idea, that is a tough break. That's like, especially for people who are very, I don't know if I've said this in a blog or in the book, but these are people, many of the Christian truthers, they are very God and country, and they're heartbroken. Like, they feel betrayed. They're the ones who are like, we have the best government, God is on our side. And when they felt like they were abandoned by both God and government on the same day, they didn't know where to turn. And so many of them turn to people like Sherry Shriner, or, the nutball out in Alex Jones or whatever. Any of these conspiracy people, they were there waiting to say, you see, I've told you all along, the truth isn't what you think it is. My truth is what really is.
I want to read a quick little blip from chapter 3, if you don't mind.
Please.
All right. Although Sherry Shriner is the one who brings us all together here, and I'm going to kind of like lead into this, how Sherry is and who she is. Although Sherry attended church as well as Christian schools, by adulthood she came to hate the idea of organized religion, considering it a New World Order front bent on destroying the Word of God. This isn't uncommon among the conspiracy theory crowd. Such thinking has to do with a combined deep mistrust of authority and overconfidence in your own expertise. There's no point in trying to break apart this constant low-level paranoia with logic. It's governed by fear and arrogance, coalescing into a persecution feedback loop. That's chilling, and it puts a lot of pieces together for the world we live in right now, because this did precurse, the Trump world. This precursed 2016, 2015, because you said it started in about 2006 or 7.
Yes. Well, Sherry's, her first book group was 2004 or so. Orgone is when she picked up in 2007. She was in the preacher business beforehand, but she didn't really start to catch fire until after 9/11, where people were just desperate for answers.
And she's just someone who maybe try to capitalize on an opportunity online to do something and grab people into her circle.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. One of the things you mentioned Trump, that really interesting thing was she and many of her people like her, many of the who we now would consider alt-right, were anti-Trump right from the very beginning. And then once they realized that their anti-Trump rhetoric wasn't paying the bills, they kind of flipped. Because Sherry had said that, Trump was a lizard and Trump was run by the New World Order. And she must have been getting pushback, because she was saying that, in the run up in 2014, And of course, before that, because he was on television, and everyone on television is a lizard. And then once she and other people, I think like Alex Jones and any of them, saw that he was appealing to the same people, they said, well, why not go? Why fight against this? Why not be part of this idea that we're all going to take down the New World Order together, with Trump kind of at the head?
Right.
So she was against Trump before she was before him, if I could borrow from political discourse.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I mean, and I didn't mean to like call them out, but the most part, when you're looking at conspiracy theories today, I mean, it's coming from that support group, if you will. So it's interesting to know that these might be the same people that would have bought into Sherry's line of work, as far as, just wanting to be a part of something, wanting to be a part of a group of people that share the same feelings and know that they're not alone in these feelings.
Absolutely. I've said this mostly to people. People don't talk to me for very long. But if Stephen Mineo had lived, he would have been in Washington on January 6th. There's no doubt he would have been in Washington on January 6th.
So let's get deeper into the book, because that's kind of how the book's, there's no surprises in the book, which is because it's a true story. I mean, it's your look at it, your investigation into it and what you found. So it was very fascinating to follow along on, your interjections into the, in between the storyline you're telling and how this is working out and how it ends up, in the end, which is sad and disappointing, but yet not shocking. And it's just it's sad, I think you want a better.
I had a woman from Australia send me an email that says, do you really think it's hopeless? And I said, I don't know if it's hopeless, but I think that we should really pay more attention to this kind of thing.
We definitely should pay attention to what's going on here. Absolutely. But I'm talking more on the sadness of Barbara and the way her ending happened. It's because that's what happened in the end. Is this guy Steve Mineo, who you mentioned before, followed Sherry Shriner online. They became very close. He was an ordained warrior, right? Would they call him a warrior?
Orgone warrior.
Ordained, sorry.
That's all right.
Orgone warrior. He'd drop in the pucks around town, dropping them around the Super Bowl in New Orleans. They had a big thing about that. So again, the intention is there. The positivity is there. It means well. That's why people want to get involved, because, what kind of evil intent is this? I want to help people. Yeah, this is a positive thing. It seems that's the carrot. That's the carrot that dangles.
You're working for God. Yeah.
Right. So this is the true mission. Because you tie it into God now. Now it's a whole. We're using your religion against you to utilize you for this mission in a sense. So this guy Steve gets fully involved. Very close to her, and then you start looking into a love relationship start happening out and about and throughout some of the members of this group who are leaving religious cults themselves of sex is the shameful thing in life. So
right, it was the sexual aspect of it is always something that amazes me. The image that I've been trying to use lately is of a gondola. The boats in Venice, they push them with a stick, right? And for them, facts are like a gondola stick. You can use one fact to push off, and then when you get to the next point, that first fact doesn't matter at all. You can just keep pushing as if that other fact never happened, because you've already moved past it. And what they do so well is they use fact number one to get to fact number two. And then if fact number three isn't supported by facts number one or two, that doesn't matter, because they're already past those facts. So the idea that orgone is special is what matters. The fact that it was essentially a sexual cure is something that they're perfectly willing to ignore, because it doesn't serve their own narrative.
Right.
And you can say that about almost all of their beliefs. The beliefs they get to are kind of supported by beliefs they had, but not really, because the stuff in the middle doesn't fit, but they don't care that it doesn't fit.
It's like trying to crack a pistachio nut that has no seal opening.
Exactly. And you had mentioned my commentary. That was the only way I felt like I could tell the story and not lose people.
Yeah.
Because there's so much stuff that we think is crazy and that it's bananas to talk about. And I just have to stop every now and again and say, remember, this is a true story and these are real people and there are real lives at stake here. Otherwise you can just spin off the rails very easily.
Yeah, no, and that's why I like the book, is because you bring it back to reality again. You know, you're like, well, if you think that's crazy, then you think this is crazy. You know, it's kind of like because the fact is she had very devoted followers, and if you crossed her, then you got excommunicated. So some of the story is a couple of excommunicated people, talking about, maybe she crossed the line on this. But everything else she talks about, I believe in. It's like, wait a minute, she broke your trust into this one little crazy portion of life, but everything else is cool. It's it's hard to wrap my head around, man.
So one of the things that Sherry did is without rhyme or reason, really, she would accuse close followers of being members of the FBI or the CIA or the New World Order. She would expose them as spies. And that would prove to all the other people that the CIA was really after her. But the thing was, the people that she would accuse knew they weren't in the CIA because they weren't in the CIA. But no one would believe it.
Didn't matter.
And it happened every time. And until you were the person who was accused of being in the CIA, right, you believed that Sherry was under siege by the CIA.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but it's crazy for the comments from the other people in the group to justify Sherry's belief that they're in the FBI. When the guy's like, you know me, I'm not in the FBI. I mean, it's The Uneasy Rider by Charlie Daniels Band. I mean, you know me all my life, man. I don't even have a garage. But it's just, I don't know. It's like to go so deep into, what she's selling, and to trust every word on someone that you've never met before. It's the gullibility of it all, the naivete,
and also the investment. And that's what, think of a bad marriage. Think of a bad marriage that lasts 30 years. And the reason it lasts 30 years was because at 10, they were like, I've been in for 10. I may as well keep your self-identity gets wrapped up in this. And then when you reach a point, and this is what happened to a lot of Sherry's followers, you reach a point where your self-identity is so wrapped up in it that you don't have another self. You don't have a different reality to go back to. You only have this reality that you've created with and for Sherry Shriner. So at that case, and again, we saw it happen politically. We are seeing it happen politically. Just keep doubling down.
Right. It's the same formula.
Absolutely.
It's the same formula. It's the buying, of course, with the ballads in Arizona, bamboo on the bamboo fibers and weird stuff like that. They want to have an answer. They never got an answer for something in their life. There's something missing as a whole, as a group of people of something. I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe if we can figure that out, we can heal and move on. But I mean, I don't know.
Well, I think it's this quest for surety, and the reason that I think it tends to affect the very religious is because they were brought up, many of them were brought up with this idea that there is this immovable truth about your place in the universe in relationship with God. And that is more complicated than that, and as people get older, they're trying to reconcile what they were told and what they believe with what's happening in the world around them. And it doesn't fit. There's all of the things that they thought, many of the things that they thought were true are false. And other things that they thought were true are problematic. And there's no way to fold them into their beliefs. So for them, and again, this is a very kind of basic explanation, but for the majority of them, it's like, all right, I either have to abandon all of my beliefs or stop accepting things that don't already coordinate with my beliefs. And many of us, as I said in the book, many of us do that like day to day. We're like, it's fine. It'll be fine. I know that this, I know that it's stupid to not walk under a ladder, but I'm going to not walk under this ladder anyway. but it begins and ends there. For Sherry's people, they came up with this commitment that just won't hold anymore. This commitment that the government is there to help you. This commitment that the church is there to help you get better in touch with God. And then you look at it and you say, that's not what's happening. So it must have been undermined by the devil. I can't be, given that I can't be wrong, what's the problem?
Right.
And it's never self-examination on this.
Right. It's nobody questions it. Could be, how can you, right? It's
Right.
like, I mean, it's taking advantage of that for sure. I mean, it's, she's.
Oh, and there are no rules about what you say about religion to get money out of people. Like, if I say this orgone box is going to cure your cancer,
right,
I go to jail. If I say, if you send me $1,000, I'll pray that your cancer gets cured, that $1,000 is tax deductible, and I am not responsible for your dying of cancer.
Right.
And that's a weird. I'm certainly not claiming that it should be done away with, but I think it's something that we have to remember that, when you don't have responsibility for what you say, like religion is one of the only places left where you can say the most horrible things without consequence because they're your core religious beliefs protected by the Constitution.
That's why you get people, preaching in double tongue, and double speak and stuff, because they don't care.
Absolutely.
Either the freakier and crazier you are, the more people are going to believe you because you're special, you're different, and it's basically having big balls.
Absolutely.
It's what it is. I mean, you're a preacher, you're a swindler, you're a hustler, and you know these people want to give you money and in hopes of a better life for themselves, and I can bring that to you, man.
Absolutely. And there's nothing for it except for those of us on the outside to say, hey, maybe this isn't the best way for you to spend your money, or maybe this isn't the best way for you to spend your time or your energy.
You giving me money is going to make you feel better.
Right.
It's, I woke up to religion early on as a kid, and it could have been because I smoked weed at a young age. I'm not quite sure that I kind of got aware, or I was woke of religion to a certain degree.
Right.
But our block was full of different religions left and right. I mean, we literally had about 7 or 8 different religions on the block, and all the kids played in the street together. There was no big deal. But when I get to the age of reason, to a certain degree of like realizing, like, why are we all different religions? What's the deal here? What's going on? Why are everyone going to a different place when we die,
Right.
It just didn't make sense to me. As a kid, it never made sense to me. So I've always kind of like have looked at a religion from afar, and just not really I've never been a part of any kind of group. I can't submit myself to a group like that.
It's weird because what I've been trying to kind of come across is if going to church makes you meaner, stop going. If it makes you nicer, keep going.
Right. If you're only angrier, but the thing is they're out is giving it up on Sunday, and then they're back to square one on Monday.
Well, the other thing, and again,
cheat card.
I talk about the Westboro Baptist Church in this way. If you saw a train going at someone, you'd feel responsible to go and push them off the tracks. And this is why it's so important to remember that these people really believe there's a train coming, and they really believe they're throwing us off the tracks.
Right.
And if I push you off the tracks and you come and you're like, hey, that was me, and you pushed me down, you're like, you didn't get hit by the train because of me. Right? Except I think their train's imaginary, and they're just going around pushing people down for no good reason. But what I think doesn't matter, because I'm not the one pushing people down.
Right.
They are.
Right.
And they believe it. And I don't think Sherry believed it, but I think Sherry's people believed it all the way to the core. And that is how, when you have someone who's in charge who doesn't believe, in charge of people who believe with all of their hearts.
Yeah.
That's a recipe for disaster.
The cognitive dissonance. That goes on, and again, reminded of the excommunicated, scoffing at Sherry, but still spreading the same message to a certain degree.
Yeah.
Not completely leading the whole thing. It seemed like Brother Rich was going to be a guy. That guy, you know what, dude? I got sucked in. I'm sorry. I can't believe I did that, and I regret everything. Steve, you should probably do that too. But no, they're like doubling down on it. Yeah, this Oregon's gotta save the world. We're still on this mission to save the world with Oregon.
Well, and the idea that Sherry is a spy now,
right?
Sherry is a reptilian.
They're so easily moved. That's the thing. Is like again, they're excommunicated. Sherry calls them FBI, and then I can't remember the woman's name, but she jumps in and starts saying, "If I trust Sherry, and if you're acting weird, I believe her too." So it's just, it's just I don't know what it is, man, because we can't relate to that. We can't succumb to that because I think not just religion involvement, but maybe environmental involvement. In their life, maybe a poor background or maybe abusive family or something else.
Okay, so here's a trigger warning for people who believe in UFOs. I'm not accusing anybody of anything at all.
Right. I believe in UFOs. I believe in UFOs.
That's fine. That's fine. I that's not the question.
Okay.
But I'm going to go very close to that.
Okay.
So I just don't want to hurt anybody's feelings.
You're good.
And I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to diagnose anyone from afar. But the number of these people, these women who had monsters coming into their bedrooms in the middle of the night when they were children is chilling. And to say that I was attacked by a demon when I was a little girl sounds like something, to me, sounds like it may be a coping mechanism of some sort. And that's as close as I want to get to it, because it was pretty irresponsible to say what I just said, but it's something that we at least have to put out there. It's something that right. There is, there's evidence. I cited in the book, one of the reasons that the Pizzagate kind of thing, one of the reasons a lot of these fringe people are very interested in child trafficking and pedophilia. I'm sorry, in stopping child trafficking and pedophilia is because they tend to be victims. It's the most victimized group in the country, the ultra religious. And that, I didn't find any ties. I didn't get any evidence. It was a bell that couldn't be unrung for me. And it's something to take seriously, whether or not there are UFOs. If there are demons sneaking into your child's room at night, take them to the police. Right. Don't take them to your priest.
Right.
I think is
right.
I think is what I'm kind of getting at.
No, that's a good point. It should be, if anything, both. Both is fine with us. Report that stuff because right, because you don't know what it is, and you're right. It could be a coping mechanism. We don't know.
No, there's no way to tell, but
there's no way to tell. But there's a lot of right. I could see your point with that. Dragged into the Light is the book. We're continuing on here with Tony Russo, who wrote the book, talking about the religious aspect of it all and the ease of people getting involved. Kelly was one of the followers who was a very religious girl, very confused woman. She killed herself in hopes to go on a mission and come back.
Yes.
Her mission was to come back to Earth. Or wherever she thought she was going. I don't know if she...
I've spoken with a couple of people. I haven't spoken with anyone who doesn't believe that she believed she was coming back. Other investigators, we all pretty much have the impression that she wasn't sure if she was coming back in that body, but she was pretty sure she was coming back. And what is kind of interesting and a little terrifying about Kelly's case is... we were talking about people you had mentioned before, right? You go to church on Sunday and then Monday everything's forgiven so you can go back. Kelly didn't believe that. Kelly, what if you lived like this ultimate kind of Christian life? You're giving to the poor, you're helping out the homeless, you're just throwing yourself at these social problems because you think you're an actual angel. We normally say that's a pretty good thing. No one worries about your mental health. When you're like, God told me to feed the poor, so I'm spending all my money to feed the poor. And then, you kill yourself and everybody's like, oh, she was crazy. Well, I think crazy, certainly troubled people are the ones who end up committing suicide, and certainly people who reach that point, the people around them wish they had known more. But, there aren't a lot of cases where someone is like, oh, well, you're just being too nice. You need psychiatric help. And that's what Kelly was really the heart of the story for me for that very reason. She was, people are like, well, maybe she had undiagnosed schizophrenia. I'm like, maybe, but maybe she really believed this. And if you really believe you're going to heaven, like, again, I don't want to call people crazy if they really believe they're going to go to heaven and see God. That's not a conversation we're ready to have as a country, certainly.
So how old was she when she died?
She was 22.
22. And you just, the way you describe her, yeah. I mean, she seems like a sweetheart who's just kind of lost her way a little bit. Really wants to do well. She wanted to fight and be a warrior for Sherry, and she got very close to Sherry. She worked hard for the group. There's no doubt about it. She went on the road trips.
Yes, she was at the famous Battle of Fort Knox. Which
right. Oh man,
the second most bananas thing in the whole book.
That Fort Knox story is very fascinating, and again, the justifying of it is another thing too. But here's this woman Kelly who devotes her life to this mission, kills herself, and Sherry Shriner, who's the leader of this group, basically with no empathy says, "Oh, it must have been the FBI was on her." Was that what it was, or that it was?
I believe that Sherry had dismissed her from the group. I believe that we mentioned before, Brother Rich had denounced her as a spy,
right? And
that Kelly had been cut off. Although there's Kelly was still encouraging people to buy orgone up until the very end. So it's a complex situation at the very least.
Yeah. There's a lot of jealousy going on. You can sense a lot of jealousy, and
insane amounts of jealousy. And I'm sorry, just because we mentioned the Battle of Fort Knox, I just want to say really quickly about it. For the listeners, so they went to Fort Knox, Kentucky. They literally drove to Fort Knox, Kentucky, and all of the people there, independently of one another, claimed that they fought aliens while they were there, and that there was a brain in a jar, and that there were these turtle people that they saved. And I don't know what that was like. I don't know what really happened there. I do know that they all said the same thing happened, and I also do know that they didn't kill a brain in a jar. But beyond that,
do you think like the core, like Sherry was like, I mean, it seemed like it's all made up, and of course it's all made up. Let me say this right. To collaborate with 4 other people on one story like this, you got to wonder how that starts. Like, all right, I'm going to make up a story, and we're all going to go with it.
I imagine it's like playing like soldier when you were a kid. I don't know if you played soldier, but like you're all out in the woods and you're all shooting at pretend enemies. Like, oh look, I got that guy. Oh, I blew up the tank. And then but you don't talk about it after because it didn't happen.
Right.
But if you believe these things are invisible and that you can see them and kill them. But the reason I wanted to mention that is because the Nashville bomber did the very same thing, and it was interesting to me that everybody said, well, this guy said he was going out to fight reptiles in the woods, and I'm like, yeah, he was. Of course he was. That's one of the things they do.
So I mean, really, it's fantasy play. It's role play in real life.
It's role play in real life, and the role playing solidifies itself in real life. We were talking about the placebo effect before, and I have one of my professors. I talked to him about that because he's very former professors, but he was very interested in the cognitive dissonance that lets this kind of thing go on. And he said, think of it as functional alcoholism. So you've got, a functional alcoholic up until the very end. They show up at work, clean, shaven, they do their job, but they're just drunk 60% of the time. And he said, think of the paranoia that way, where like you can hide it for only so long, but you can be very good at hiding it. And Kelly worked for a while in in a drug addiction place. And Sherry Shriner preached that people who were mentally ill, people who were addicted to drugs, that was demonic possession. That was not any kind of mental imbalance or youth trauma. That was sheerly demonic possession. And so Kelly started wearing a necklace, an orgone necklace, to work. And she felt better because she was no longer afraid that these guys were going to kill her when she got there. And I can't imagine going to work and believing that everyone there is a monster waiting for their opportunity to kill you, and then feeling better because you put a piece of glass around your neck and now the monsters can't get you anymore. And yet that is the type of person, when you hear about that, you're like, well, I understand that maybe she was having a mental illness. But again, when you grab your cross, when you say your rosaries to make your grandma feel better, heal quicker or whatever, we all participate in this in one way or another. We all participate in the spiritual aspect of the hope. We just call it the hope aspect of life. Whenever you were hoping against hope, you are participating in this. And I'm a Mets fan. I hope against hope all the time. But when you're making your decisions based on what you wish you had hoped for in the past, that's when it gets really kind of muddy. And when you live your whole life that way, that's when it can be problematic.
Yeah, man. It's like I said, it's a real look inside of a sect of our society that is, I don't know if they're gaining in size as much as they're gaining in popularity, because it's becoming more accessible, or it's becoming more like agreeable, I guess you can say. I feel more comfortable because you think the same way I think.
Absolutely. Now you're not afraid you're not afraid to say, I believe in reptilians, because fewer people think you're crazy. Enough people think you're not crazy. The DSM-5, is that a thing? There's a book that says what is mental illness and what isn't mental illness. And I think it's called the DSM-5.
Okay.
And delusion is described as believing in something for which there's absolutely no proof or evidence, and that not a lot of other people believe in. And that and not a lot of other people believe in is what I call like the religion clause. Because I don't think we should say that everyone who's religious is also mentally ill. But I do want to say, if we're going to say that, you can be religious without being mentally ill, then we can't talk about religions that we don't like being mental illness, because that is an accident of history, Yeah.
Well, I mean, calling religious people mental, I don't buy that.
Right. No.
Because it's, it's something that's taught. It's taught to you at such a young age. You're indoctrinated into it without any, before you get any chance for reason in your head. So, maybe we should step back a little bit about giving, the 3-4-year-old child, the baptism and the lessons in God before we teach him how to be a decent person.
If I had a magic wand and I could solve the world's problems with a magic wand, I would just take away tax exemption for religion, and then only people who really believed in it would do it. There is such a profit motive behind religious charlatanism. Behind legitimate religion, there isn't really I was raised Catholic. The Catholic Church has been fantastically wealthy for a very, very long time. I don't think they would notice if people started taxing them. But this idea that, hey, I can go and rent a storefront, and any money that I make renting that storefront, I don't have to pay for, because I'm just selling hope out of that storefront, and hope isn't taxable. That's a problem. And when we see people using it, weaponizing other people's spirituality, it's something that I really think we have to at least discourage. And one of the things that every economist will agree about is, if you want to discourage something, tax it. If you want to encourage something, don't tax it. And if you believe in something, like I still write. I love being a writer. I love talking to people. One of the downsides of that is I have to pay taxes on the money I make writing and talking to people. I'm going to still do it and still pay the taxes. If you really love talking to people and helping them find God that much, you won't mind paying taxes to do it any more than I like paying that I mind paying taxes to write.
Right.
And that is really the way I wish we would start looking at it, because it really cuts out the charlatans at a pretty high level.
What did Bono say about the God I know isn't short of cash, mister?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, absolutely.
So, I mean, you gotta, I mean, preaching or praying shouldn't cost money, you know?
Right.
It shouldn't cost you a dime. And that's, I mean, they're making, we all know that scam, and how much they fight it off, how much they don't want it to be taxed, but they want to be influential on what's going on in the world.
And it makes it hard for us to protect our friends and neighbors and even family members from being taken advantage of by these people, because we don't have the same weaponry they do.
You know, just a quick side note on the journalism thing. I learned when I was, learning my craft, man. I learned, the news on TV is written for the mind of a 12-year-old.
Yeah. So
when you're reaching the masses, that's your masses right there. When you're looking at the percentage of people, 300 million people in this country, there's a large percentage that the comprehension level is kind of right there. That's where it stops. Then become adults kind of with that arrested development.
Yes. So on the print side, we have the same problem. And one of the arguments that I always made until I just left print journalism altogether, because I worked for a small paper, I didn't work for a big paper. And they were like, well, this needs to be shorter. We need to just, give them, the meat and potatoes of it, but we don't. And what I always argued is anyone, and this is at the turn of the century, right? So anyone that is still picking up a physical newspaper wants to read. They're not picking up a physical newspaper to get the gist. Right. That's what the TV news is for, right. But one of the failures of small local journalism is just that, they are still competing with Facebook instead of appealing to people who want to be informed. Because I still think of the newspaper as the place to get informed. Something that, you have to put your name on it, and your name is on it forever, and it's in the library, and you want to get it right. And when you get it wrong, they're going to say, this is his name, and here's where he got it wrong. Right. So you don't have the same kind of, like kind of bouncing along that you do on a blog or any place like that. And I think that it's unfortunate that print journalism has kind of fallen, local small print journalism has kind of fallen along the side, because that is where people learn that no journalism can be trusted, is in their local paper,
Maybe you should start
better or worse.
Maybe you should start giving away some orgone with every article.
I might sell orgone and have it on the. Maybe I'll get I'll start a newspaper with the Orgone Express or whatever.
The
Courier.
And I appreciate you hanging on it. Just I got a few more things I want to wrap about.
Please,
Is that
as long
cool?
as you need me, I got all day.
Cool. Tony Russo is with us here. Dragged into the light: truthers, reptilians, super soldiers, and death inside an online cult. We talked about the death, and the Steve Mineo story is a really fascinating aspect of this whole thing, and it really just shows the depth people will fall into this world of the rabbit hole world, I guess you can say. It really is what it is. Reptilians, that's kind of been a hot item lately. We've talked about that. The truthers, of course, we discussed that. So the super soldiers is obviously another thing that these people believe in. And I think, a lot of things you're talking about they believe in, this all happened prior to 2016 and the Trump movement. But all of these things that they believe in are being picked up by the Trump, by the conspiracy theorists who believe Trump still won. So that's where we're at, that's where we're at. So
one of the things I didn't mention the word, I used the word QAnon once in the book, and I actually added it into the introduction. And as I was writing it, I said, if I bring QAnon in, nobody's going to know what that is. No one's going to understand it. Because it's just too convoluted. And then, of course, by the time the book was coming out, QAnon is on the front cover of Time. I'm like, all right, well, maybe people do know about QAnon now.
Right.
This drive, though, that kind of, it's been bubbling for a long time and continues to bubble. And it is they're not wrong, is what I keep saying over and over again. Yes, the government doesn't like you and is not working in your interest. Yes, your preacher doesn't believe in God and only wants the worst for you. But that's something you have to deal with individually. I've been teasing some friends who are, I think that if you're on Twitter, for example, and you want to talk about someone in politics, it should be your own personal representative. Like if your representative isn't your main focus, then you're part of the problem. Like, I don't care what a representative in Michigan is doing. I mean, I wish they didn't do it if it's something mean, but I have my own representative here who's a piece of human garbage, and that should be my focus. But it's easier to focus on things you can't be responsible for. Like, I'm responsible. I didn't run against this guy and beat him, and now he's,
Right.
the congressman for life. I can't do anything about that. I know that. This guy's got this job forever, and I'm powerless. But I can point out the evil in the world. I can say, well, look at what that person's doing, or look at what this other person's doing. Things that I'm not responsible for, I can have a louder voice about. And that is the primary concern of the 21st century. It's not a lack of personal responsibility as much as it is a lack of acknowledgement that there's such a thing as personal responsibility. We know what we can't fix, and rather than trying hard to fix what we, quote, can't fix, we just take the easy targets that we are not it's not my fault,
Right,
so I can complain about it.
Right.
But if it is my fault, I can't complain about it, and that's where we end up with the finger pointing.
Yeah, there's no responsibility, no self-responsibility, no. That sounds real familiar. Not having to be accountable for anything, There's always somebody else's problem,
Yes, and these people are just the Sherry Shriner, the Shrinerites is what I call them, and they are just a cartoonish version of this. The idea that there's a reptile in the White House is a cartoonish version of, well, I can't get anything done at the local level, but I'm going to complain about the president because other people voted for him, and that makes those other people evil. I'm fine. I'm still good. They're just taking advantage of me.
Do you think it being so easily gullible for these conspiracy theories? We've always had conspiracy theories growing up. I mean, Bigfoot has been on the National Enquirer cover my whole life. Elvis is still alive. I mean, I haven't heard any resolve for that, by the way. So I think he's still alive. We haven't heard an official he's dead. So I just want to make sure National Enquirer knows.
In Men in Black, Tommy Lee Jones said he's not dead. He just went home.
Right. You're right.
I believe Tommy Lee Jones on that one.
Yeah, well, what's funny is the theory is that the night he was born, the UFOs appeared above his house. So
there you go. Tommy Lee Jones is right.
They knew. But I mean, that was we had In Search Of on TV. That was kind of the borderline of a conspiracy theory type of show.
Right.
It was fun to watch. It was cool. We've always kind of had them. They've always kind of been there in the background of our lives. Just like, again, the magazine article on the rack at the supermarket. It's there if you want it, and it's always there. But now it seems to be more easily digestible. Where back in the day it wasn't.
Well, it's also the faux intellectualizing of it is more appealing. It's hard to be smart, but it's easy to sound smart. And it's hard to say, well, I don't know what's really going on, but I'll look into it. And it's easy to say, one of the things that they talk a lot about is they talk a lot about physics. These are people, very few of them have degrees beyond high school. Some of them haven't gone to high school, but they're talking about quantum physics and how that allows time travel.
Right.
Like, you don't. It's rather than admit a shortcoming or an ignorance on something, you double down on how much you know. And when there are no rules, it's a lot easier to be smart than when there are rules. And this notion that nobody wants to be talked down to, right? Everybody wants to be treated as an intellectual equal, whether they've done the work to earn that or not, is one of the difficulties. And the other difficulty is people who are, public intellectuals don't want to seem like they're talking down to people. Well, and so it's like a perfect storm of, I don't want to hurt your feelings and I don't want my feelings hurt.
But the queen of double down was Sherry Shriner.
Absolutely.
I mean,
there's nothing. Yeah.
I mean, I just enjoyed watching her try to. Well, I didn't enjoy it, but to a certain degree of like, she just can't stop herself. She's just like, she's all in on this, man. I mean, and she knows she's full of it because she's completely lying about specific events where you can fact check.
And not only that, like, she will contradict herself within a show and not address the contradiction.
Right.
I'd listened to too many of her radio shows, and she's clearly talking off the top of her head about larger points that she's thought about in the past. But she will say the wrong word, and instead of correcting herself, she'll just carry that wrong word through for the rest of the 2 hours. It's just this maniacal, like, once you admit
that's the way I say it.
Once you admit that you could have been wrong once, then you may be wrong all the time.
You open up a door for them. Oh, she messed up that word. Our Lord and Savior didn't say the word right. They didn't pronounce it.
I'm not infallible if I ever make a mistake.
Right.
And so if you don't acknowledge a mistake, it's the same as not making one. And again, that's something that we see play out every day, in certainly in national politics, but also in regular life. We all have that friend who tells a story and you're like, that story is not right. And then they make you like the co-star of the story so that you can't, completely debunk them. And you're like, all right, fine. Yes, you beat up the 12 ninjas and I tripped the 13th one. Fine.
You better go on with it. Right.
Yeah. They bring you along. They implicate you in it. And once you're part of it, you can't. Once you have skin in the game,
you justify it.
Yeah. You have to stay. You have to stay or leave for a very good reason and very pointedly. And the leaving is just so much harder than the staying.
Well, I mean, it's so much easier to say, well, she meant to lie for a purpose, and
yes.
you just justify it. I mean, that's what most religion is justifying in a sense of it is okay to do this because of this, even though it says this somewhere else, but it says this here, I'm good to go. It's just, it's a lack. It is a lack of education, but it's really not really an education as far as getting, 2 + 2 = 4. But although we need that, it's a lack
of
critical
thinking.
You're right, critical thinking. How to, how society works. But I mean, I don't even know if that's even a good idea to a certain degree. But I think it's more of a, I don't know, an empathy class or something. I'm just. How to be a decent human.
My other magic wand moment would be the only thing you could do for the first 10 years that you were in school is read novels. And because that makes you empathetic. And once you're done, developing an addiction to reading that's going to keep you being an empathetic person, then we'll give you some facts to work with. Because facts are only useful if you're going to help people with them. If you're going to make people feel bad on purpose, you shouldn't have them.
Will audiobooks count?
Yeah, audiobooks would count.
Okay, thank you. I've listened to a few of those, but I read yours, and I really did enjoy it, man. And I mean,
thank you very much.
The storyline was fascinating. I won't tell everything, obviously, because, I mean, you can read it and you can check it out yourself. I mean, because not a lot online. I looked up online on Sherry Shriner, and, I mean, she's kind of still a hidden subject to a certain degree. It kind of reminded me a little bit the phone sex operators. You listen to them, and they're telling you everything you want to hear, then you're fantasizing about who she is, and without her giving up her identity, you just hear a voice.
And it's very much her allure was the fact that she created this mystery about where she was and who she was. She didn't lie ever. And well, except about being, I don't think that she was as poor as she made out. But other than that, she didn't lie. She just let people imagine, what her life was like out there in the wilderness, fighting the good fight against evil demons. I mean, she would say that UFOs crashed at her house all the time because they were coming to kill her. And the orgone stopped them and made the UFO crash. This is
a movie. This is a sci-fi movie. She wrote a movie, and she created these crazy scenes. I mean, this is sci-fi, man. This is science fiction. I mean, it really is, and I mean, it's like real. It's I don't know, man. I can't. I'm trying to rationalize it.
It's one of the difficulties is very many people think that my book is fiction.
I don't. I know.
It's a common. They look at the cover and they read the back and they're like, "Oh, this is a fun story about aliens." And it's not fun and it's not about aliens.
No, just Google Steve Mineo, Google Sherry Shriner. I mean, it's all there. I mean, it's a deep, twisted relationship, like you said, very convoluted, very complicated, involvement of people who have basically are living their life on the other side of reality, and that's their reality. And if you step outside of their bounds, then you're crazy. And if
you stay in, then we think you're crazy.
Right. So there's really, you really got to wake up to your own self and realize what's going on. And the storyline leads to the death of Steve Mineo and the storyline between him and his quote unquote wife. And you even detail it down to the song they listened to. And I went to your website, Tracked Into the Light, and you have a song list to this book. It's great. I love it, man.
I'm very proud of that.
No, I think it's awesome, man. I was like, this is the best thing ever. Are you kidding me? I was like, right when I saw it, I was like, let me pull it up here. All right, so Dragged Into the Light, you created it's on Apple Music and Spotify. Now the song that was between Barbara and Steve was Eyes Without a Face by Billy Idol. And
yes.
And I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna let this story ruin my song, just so you know, because I do like that song. But that they're correlated to this story is like, all right, it's sad. You can see how these two people who were just very hopelessly hopeless.
Yeah. So Steve, the as far as I've come to understand it, I guess is the best way to put it without being too pointed, that was Barbara's she called it her breakdown song. Like when she was at her lowest, she would listen to that one to kind of cheer her up. But I don't know. So the night that Stephen Mineo died, they had been drinking a lot and using a drug called kratom, which is like a faux marijuana you can buy on the internet. Stephen took that in amounts that have been known to kill people. So he had a bunch of it in his system when he died. And I don't know if she broke up with him or not. I wouldn't be shocked to find out that she did. But something happened and he went out into the woods and he shot off some of his guns, his gun sometimes, and he got her to shoot one bullet out of the gun when they were outside, and then they went back in, and at some point his hands were on the barrel of the gun, his hands were over the barrel of the gun, and her hands were on the trigger, and the gun was pressed to his head and the gun went off. And whether the argument is that she didn't mean to kill him. Some people say that he committed suicide. I have a third theory that I'm not going to tell you because I think it's interesting, and I think you should have to get through the whole book, because if I just told you, it wouldn't make sense without the rest of the book. But the long of the short is that he ends up with this bullet in his head, and she goes to jail for it. She actually just lost her appeal recently, so she's going to do her time.
That really bothers me. It really does bother me, because I think the way you tell the story as far as the police goes, it seems like the police didn't take into consideration Stephen's alter life. Maybe they did. I mean, it seemed like they should have and said that this guy really lost it. And it's very plausible that this guy had his hands over his gun because he was pointing it at his head. And because you see that many times, hey, here's the gun, kill me. I want, this and that. And
so, yes. So my major quibble with the police, besides the fact that, eventually it was proved that Stephen's hands were on the gun, but
right.
They told her that his hands weren't on the gun. So that was a problem. The other problem was Barbara was, probably still drunk out of her mind. She was probably in no condition to be interviewed, and I feel like that may have been a little irresponsible on their part. I think that they intentionally didn't do a blood alcohol on her so that they wouldn't get in trouble for interviewing someone who, because she wasn't clearly drunk, but she was A, probably a functional alcoholic, and B, hopped up on she just shot a guy in the head, or a guy just shot himself in the head in front. Either way, I've never been up close to a murder, to a death like that, to a violent death. But it's not something you're just like, oh, wow, that was weird. That's got to get you right to the core. I mean, if you put yourself in the position of being 2 feet away from a guy's head when it explodes, it's
shocking, and it's a real.
It's tough that they interviewed her right then instead of
but it's real sobering. It's a sobering wake up call at the end of the book, is what it is. It's you want that kind of like oh, she got let off because they were both hammered and you add guns to the mix, but here you are living in a state or in the side of the country where how dare you blame the gun for this accident.
That is 100% true. She does make the qualification. So she was charged with 3rd-degree murder, which is only a charge in like 4 states, I think, 3 or 5, someplace between 3 and 5 states. And it's acting with a depraved indifference to human life. And when you choose not to let go of a gun when someone has it up against their head, I think you probably are acting with depraved indifference to human life. I mean, but this is a woman who didn't have much of her own thoughts anyway. She wasn't a strong person, and I don't know what it's like to be bullied into something like that. So
you kind of said it, or someone said it, that they were just very sweet people, very nice people, or something like that, which was kind of a euphemism for being simple-minded.
Yeah, Stephen was a sweet kid, his mother said. Yeah,
right. So being a little simple-minded and easily taken, easily manipulated, and that's kind of what the whole book is about. And the fact is, as we wrap it up, and I really appreciate your time, dude. I mean, this has been a really fascinating conversation. And Sherry just, a couple years ago, she's no longer here. So
right.
As you see like one horror movie end, and then the serial murderer is dead at the end, and then all of a sudden you see the baby brother pick up the axe. You know what I mean? And then now the baby. That guy's the next leader. So who's could be the next orgone leader? Who's could be the next Sherry Shriner? Because do you see that kind of ending, or do you see it just beginning?
Well, the online persona that's leading the Shrinerites goes by the name of Rhonda Z, and they're still active, and they're doing some very early Christian stuff where they're going back into Sherry's prophecies and showing how they're coming true. So if you want to read what Sherry thought about COVID, you totally can.
I saw that link.
If you want to hear how Sherry predicted the Biden presidency, you can find that.
You throw so many darts at the wall, you're going to get right once in a while, right?
It's absolutely the case.
Or maybe it's not. I don't know. I mean, who knows, right? That's your belief.
Well, there's also the Bible codes, just real quick. The idea behind the Bible codes is that was one of Sherry's prophecy tools, is that the whole history of the human race is written in the Bible in code, and you can decode it and use it to prophesize. The guy who figured this out, quote, figured it out, unquote, was an atheist, and he didn't believe that the Bible, he believed that the Bible was written by time traveling aliens. And that's why it made sense that they knew all of human history. Once he put out his thesis, several mathematicians came forward and said, no, you pick any long book and you're going to find names from history in there. So Moby Dick, you're going to find Hitler. You're going to find the words that add up to Hitler when you do like this kind of cabal numerology analysis.
Right.
Any work of great length is going to be susceptible to numerology for prophecy reasons.
Interesting.
And so Sherry has 1 million, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of words in her works. She was on the radio for an hour a night for between 1 and 3 nights a week for almost a decade. That's a lot of words. You're gonna
and her minions.
Yeah, you'll find it.
Her minions wrote it out too, right?
Yeah, they
they
literally listened and transcribed. That was one of the things that Kelly did.
Right, Kelly.
She listened to and transcribed Sherry's.
Right.
So her words are all written down from the audio, and they are searchable. I mean,
right.
I don't like to admit it, but sometimes I'm like, what crazy thing did she say? And I could make up a crazy thing.
Right.
Type it in that search engine and find where she said it.
It's and the fact that she claims, or they claim, her followers claim that she predicted the death of Steve Mineo, claiming that Barbara was a crazy woman.
Well, that's actually true.
I mean, right. So that's just like, it's so bizarre. But that's something that you don't need to be a prophet or a godlike being to see that this person might not be the right person for you. Get away. That's a bad situation you're in.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like, you can look at it and say, this is going to end badly. And if you can help it along and help your own cause.
Right. To create a more bad scenario.
Then why not? And that's exactly what Sherry did.
Man, all right. So real quick, have you said you've gotten some responses from the book itself, but as far as the followers, have any of them reached out to you since this? I mean, I know you interviewed a lot of them and talked to them, but the ex ones, are any negative from today's?
Not a lot of negative. I got a couple early on, before the book came out. When I was finishing up the research, I got a couple of. I would call them Sherry threats. They're like, don't make fun of the prophet, or bad things will happen to you, that kind of thing. But no direct threats. But one of the women, I mentioned her, and I didn't mention her by name in the book because she asked me not to. But I mentioned that she asked me not to mention her in the book. She's been in touch with me, and we've been back and forth on Facebook for a couple of months now, and she just is bringing me up to date on everybody and how everybody's doing. And so she's the one.
So it seems like they're kind of picking it up on more positive intentions, or am I still?
Oh, no, they're still negative. She's just one of the people who was already kicked out.
Oh, okay,
so
I got you. Right.
She, after she saw the show, she was more interested in talking to me than she was when it was just some dumb book I was writing.
When you were getting involved in this, at what point did you say to yourself, "What am I getting myself involved in?"
Oh, I would say maybe a month in. I remember, because it's my job. Like it's what this wasn't a hobby or anything.
Right.
And I remember saying to my wife one time, I'm like, you know what? I mean, because I'd be in front of the computer for 15 hours a day. And I said to my wife, I don't know how much of this is research and how much of this is screwing around online at this point. Like, because it's just all like, and then this happened, and then this happened. Then you're like, all right, am I just looking for stupid stuff now, or am I collecting information that's going to help me write this book?
You mentioned listening to something and turning it off because you couldn't handle it anymore. I was like, this is just insane.
Yeah, it's the problem is that it makes you feel bad. It's like a dog whistle for depression. Like, you don't know why you feel worse, but you feel a lot worse when you listen to Sherry Shriner for a long time.
And it's just sad that people get lost in it, and aren't able to recognize, the separate the bullshit from the reality, the curse here. But it's a real fascinating trip into the psyche of a segment of our population, a sect of our population.
Yes.
The bubbles of our population that just don't want to be a part of the regular society, and they're anti-society, if anything, right? I mean,
and they feel bad for us for not knowing.
Right? And they're the smart ones, and we're the dumb ones.
Yeah, we're all the smart ones. Everyone else is crazy.
Tony Russo, I mean, I thank you so much. As soon as I dropped the book down, I was like, all right, metaphorically speaking, as soon as I exited out of the page, I was like, I can't wait to talk to you, man. I can't wait to talk to you. So I do appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Dragged into the Light, Truthers, Reptilians, Super Soldiers, and Death Inside an Online Cult is available now, and I'll let you tell people where they can find it.
Oh, anywhere that you can find fine books and not so fine books. I'd like to hope mine is a fine book. You can find it on Amazon. It's kind of funny. If you go to Amazon, it'll say Sherry's book comes up with it. It'll say people who bought this book have also looked at this book. And it's because people want to see if she really wrote the book. If you like to support local, and I'm not accusing you of being a bad person if you don't, but there's a thing called bookshop.org, which is like Amazon, but you put your local bookstore's name in it. And so you order it from Bookstop, and they send you the book, and then they send your bookstore their cut of the sale, which I think is an awesome thing, and I wish more
great.
people knew about that.
No, that's really cool, and you also have a few photos in the book to give people an idea of what we're looking at.
You can find all that on my Facebook page. All my socials are by Tony Russo, BYTONYRUSSO, on all the social stuff.
Right on, man. Well, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing the stories. Like I said, it's a fascinating book. It's a little bit of a scary wake up call kind of book, to let us know that these people exist and they're out there, man. That's
and they mean it.
And they mean it. Lovely, awesome. I'm just gonna have a good day myself. You have a great day yourself.
All right.
Thanks for being a part of the Mothership Radio Show, man. I appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you, and keep watching the sky.
A lot of people don't realize what's really going on. They view life as a bunch of unconnected incidents and things. They don't realize that there's this, lattice of coincidence that lays on top of everything. I'll give you an example, show you what I mean. Suppose you're thinking about a plate of shrimp. Suddenly somebody will say, plate or shrimp or plate of shrimp, out of the blue, no explanation. No point in looking for one either. It's all part of a cosmic unconsciousness.
You eat a lot of acid, Miller, back in the hippie days?
I'll give you another instance. You know the way everybody's into weirdness right now? Books in all the supermarkets about Bermuda triangles, UFOs, how the Mayans invented television, that kind of thing.
I don't read them books.
Well, the way I see it, it's exactly the same. There ain't no difference between a flying saucer and a time machine. People get so hung up on specifics, they miss out on seeing the whole thing. Take South America, for example. In South America, thousands of people go missing every year. Nobody knows where they go. They just disappear. But if you think about it for a minute, you realize something. There had to be a time when there was no people, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Well, where did all these people come from? I'll tell you where. The future. Where'd all these people disappear to?
The past?
That's right. And how'd they get there?
How the fuck do I know?
Flying saucers. Which are really, yeah, you got it, time machines.